We now move on to the last of our four main macroeconomic targets, and that is for the economy to achieve low, stable inflation. The UK's target for inflation is 2%. So if it increases above that or goes below it, the government and the economy will look to change it back to that towards that level. We measure I beg your pardon. The definition of inflation is it is measured by a sustained increase in the general price level. So it's a sustained increase in a general price level. In terms of measuring it, it is measured by what we call the consumer price index and the retail price index. Both measurements of inflation are in effect a basket of goods. So this basket of goods is said to be representative of a typical family in the UK. So for example, we might buy certain foods, look at certain bills that people pay, certain goods that people buy on a regular basis, and look at how prices change from one month to the next. So it's calculated once a month normally. CPI, RPI, Consumer Price Index, Retail Price Index. Let's think about now how we go about looking at different types of inflation. You have to be aware of demand pull inflation and something that we call cost push inflation. In the next topic, we'll be looking at diagrams which will be able to graph these two different types of inflation, but for now, let's just cover what these are. Let's think about demand pull first of all. As demand increases for a certain good or service in the economy, obviously interest in that particular good or service will increase. This will often enable businesses to justify increasing prices because they know people will still buy it in big quantities. Another reason, demand pull inflation, as people start to demand more of a certain good or service, as resources are fixed, resources start to become scarce. That scarcity will lead to an increase in prices. Let's think about the next type of inflation, something we call cost push inflation. Here, we're looking at costs to businesses. If the raw material prices for making a good or a service increase, or labour costs increase, or the tax on businesses starts to increase, clearly this will increase the costs of making goods and services for businesses across the country. This will mean that in order to make profits or maintain profit margins, businesses will have to increase prices in order to be successful still. So the increase in cost will lead to the businesses having to push up their prices. Very quickly, I just want to go back to measuring inflation. One difficulty we've got is in measuring the true level of inflation in the economy. And this is because everyone has a different inflation rate. The RPI and CPI will never be truly representative of every person in the UK economy. It doesn't include every single item because that would just be ridiculously difficult to calculate. So if you buy one basket of goods every month and your friend buys a different basket of goods, technically those prices will change at different levels than the other basket of goods, which means that prices will change at different rates, so you will each have different inflation levels. Let's think now about the consequences of inflation for the economy. So in other words, why inflation is seen as a bad thing. Think about the two simpler ones first of all. Something we call menu costs and something we call shoe leather costs. Menu costs first of all. If prices are constantly changing from month to month, then businesses consequently have to keep changing the prices they charge their customers to reflect inflation in the economy. If it's changing rapidly on a regular basis, that means businesses have to reprint their menus, their adverts with prices on, for example, on a very regular basis. That clearly will cost them a lot of money. Shoe leather costs. When people put money in the bank, they will look for the best interest rate. If we have inflation in the economy, then that interest rate becomes more and more important. Let's think about why. If I have £100 to invest into a bank and I find a 4% interest rate, I know my money the end of the year will be worth roughly £104. If we have inflation running at 5%, then it means that my money is actually worth less than what it was before, simply because my money will now purchase less money than what it used to be able to. So I will have to hunt around the economy, different banks, different building societies, to try and find an interest rate above the inflation rate. So the higher the inflation rate, the more important it's for me to find a good savings account. Let's move on to some other problems or consequences of inflation. Another important one is lack of competitiveness. People across the world, when they choose to buy goods and services from other parts of the world, will look at the prices. If our prices are increasing higher than other countries' prices, goods from the UK economy, services from the UK are going to become more expensive. This might reduce the level of exports from the UK economy. It will also mean that imports seem cheaper than what they are compared to British goods, so they increase. So it's likely to create a bigger trade deficit for the UK economy. That will in turn mean that the economy might start to see rising unemployment, and it also might see lower economic growth in the future. So inflation is seen as quite a serious problem. A further problem is planning difficulties for businesses. Businesses like to know where they are. They like to know what the inflation will be in the future, so they can set their prices and their sales forecasts in advance. That aids them to invest confidently in the economy. If they're not sure what's going to happen to prices in the future, then it might mean that they might not invest in the economy, simply because they're not sure where the economy will be going in the future. Final part of this topic though, I want to bring in the importance of deflation. The UK economy targets inflation of 2%. If inflation is such a bad thing, why don't we aim for deflation? This is when we have a general fall in the price level of the economy. The problem with deflation is that it leads to nobody buying anything. We have lower demand, especially for luxury items or expensive items. Let's think about why this is the case. If prices are falling, I will not personally go and buy a house. If I buy a house for £100,000 today, if we have deflation, I know that the value of my house will fall over the next year or so. That means I'm not going to buy it. If I don't buy that house, it means that building contractors across the country will not build any more houses. That creates more unemployment. So you have negative consequences for the economy of deflation. So why don't we aim for 0%? So no deflation but no inflation. People like their wages to increase every year. It makes them feel like they're getting somewhere. So a low level inflation is the target for our economy.